It's wonderful to be here, and particularly wonderful to have the opportunity to talk about the IB. And the reason why it's a wonderful opportunity from my point of view is that I regard myself as the IB's biggest fan. It's a self-appointed role, it's unpaid, but I like to take it on anyway. And the reason why I think it's wonderful is because I completed the diploma program 13 years ago now, and I feel like what I learned in the diploma program has an impact on me still now, every day. I was asked to talk to you about one particular part of the diploma program because, as I understand it, you're all looking to be doing it either next year or the year after. And that particular part, as was mentioned, was what's called CAS. The diploma program has got a lot of shortenings, and it's hard to remember all of them. But CAS stands for, as was mentioned, creativity, action, and service. And what I want to talk about is why I think CAS is important and why I'd like to think everybody here will enjoy it when they get to the point of having to do it. Now, the first thing that has to be said is that CAS is not something that you get marked on. It's one of the things that sits on top of the main subjects. So the main subjects, everybody has to do a higher level subject and a standard level subject, 3 of each. For me, the higher level subjects were English, geography, and chemistry. And the standard level subjects were Japanese, biology, and maths. And everybody has to do the full breadth, the same as that. And then CAS sits on top of that. The CAS requirement, roughly, is about 150 hours. 50 hours, 50, creativity, action, and service. And what I would like to emphasize, and if you only listen to one thing, please listen to this, is that you should aim to do all of those things, even if you're not comfortable in all of those things. But I can tell you that right now, I'm sure you've got a lot of schoolwork, and I'm sure you know that when you get to the diploma program, that schoolwork level is probably going to go up. I wanted to share very briefly a story about what it felt like, for me at least, when the CAS component came along. Because as you well know, there are times in the year where schoolwork ramps up. You've got essays, you've got assignments, you've got tests and exams on the horizon, and it's all getting pretty heavy and quite a bit. So you've got all of these assignments and things coming up, and there's a point at which, as I'm sure you well know, it all gets just a little bit much. I wanted to share very briefly my experience with exactly that during the start of the diploma program, right in the early days. At the start of the diploma program, everything had piled up, and I was then told that I had to do these CAS requirements, the 50 hours. And it all got a bit much. And like you see in the movies, I was at home and literally pacing up and down the hallway of our house where I was living with my parents, being very stressed, really stressed. My dad came up to me and he grabbed me by the shoulders and asked me a single question. And the single question I'll share with you in a moment, but I need to explain very briefly about my dad. My dad is about kind of that tall. I'm actually the tallest member of my family by about a foot, which is surprising because I'm not very tall. But the rest of my family are virtually dwarves. And my dad looks very similar to, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with, you know those garden gnomes that you get in some garden? He looks very similar to that. He's got the beard, he's kind of a bit tubby. And I love him, but he's quite mad. And he says some things that are slightly unusual. In fact, we've got a deal with him, a long-term deal with him, that when we realise that he's actually going a little bit crazy, that we are required to take him out to a field and quietly put him down. So that's the deal. And it was this scenario that I thought, well, maybe we'd reached that point in time, which was going to be a real hassle because I had a lot of homework to do. The question that he asked me as I'm pacing up and down, very stressed because I've got CAS on top of everything else going on at that time, he grabs my shoulders and he says to me, "How do you eat an elephant?"
And I was like, what sort of a question is that? I mean, I've got all these other stresses and all this other stuff going on in my life. Apart from anything else, I want to spend time with my friends and family. And you ask me this sort of stupid question, would you leave me alone and let me get on with things? But he held me by the shoulders so that I couldn't do that at all. And eventually, once my befuddled look had lasted long enough, he gave me the answer to the question, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer to the question is, the only way that you can eat an elephant is to break it down into very small bits, eat each small bit, and eventually you will have got through the whole thing. So why did he ask me that? Well, the reason is because at that point in the diploma program, early days with CAS added on top, it all seemed a bit much. But just by breaking it down into the components, by eating one bit at a time and getting rid of each bit at a time, it became a hell of a lot more easy, more doable. I passed the slightly crazy advice on to you as well.